I call this meeting to order. This is a regular meeting of the Northfield Public School Board. Today is Monday, July 10th, 2023, and the time is 6 p.m. This meeting is being live streamed and recorded. The recording of this meeting will be posted on the district website as soon as possible. Welcome members of the community here tonight to observe the important work being done on behalf of all school district stakeholders. Dr. Hillman, we have some items in the table file.
Yes.
Status.
You bet. We have several items in the table file. We have some appointments, increase, decrease, change in assignment, and we have one retirement.
Okay, thank you very much. If there are no objections, we will add these items to the agenda as we move forward. Is there a motion to approve the agenda as presented? Moved by Jeff, second by Amy. Thank you. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay, motion carries. And we are now on to item 3, public comment portion of our meeting. We do have one person signed up. Kristen Twitchell, and I have a few comments before you make your way up. This is an opportunity for residents, business and property owners, parents, guardians, students, and employees of the Northfield School District to address the board. All comments to the board must adhere to the guidelines set in place by District Policy 206 regarding public comment. This is not a time to debate an issue, but only for the board to hear your comments. You are prohibited from making comments about specific students, staff, and administrators. The board respects and values input, but when it relates to a specific individual or to a specific matter, this input must be heard by the appropriate personnel, including the building principal or superintendent, and not during an open meeting of the school board. You will be gavelled out of order if your comments are not in compliance with these guidelines. Please address the board from the podium. After being recognized by the chair, identify yourself and if you represent a group. We require that you limit your remarks to 3 minutes. You are not allowed to yield your time to another person. It is expected that members of the public will address their remarks with civility and respect. Personal attacks by anyone addressing the board are unacceptable. The board has allotted up to a total of 30 minutes for public comment at regular school board meetings. I'll now begin to call those who have signed up to speak in order in which they signed in. Vice Chair Corey Butler will be monitoring the speaker's time. He will signal each speaker with the time they have remaining at 1 minute, 30-second, and 10-second intervals. Again, please make your comments as brief as possible, but no more than 3 minutes. And now we welcome Kristen.
Thank you. Thank you to Dr. Hillman. Thank you to the school board. I appreciate the opportunity. So I'm actually here on behalf of my daughter, Charlotte Handling, who is going to be in 7th grade, and her friends. And she just wanted me to take a moment to affirm that the district fully welcomes all of our students into all activities, regardless of their race, their gender, their sexual orientation. And it was very important for her to have that said publicly and for the board to hear it. So thank you. And I just want to say that we affirm that Northfield continues to be an open and welcoming community for all of our students, regardless of who they are. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Okay, item number 4 is announcements and recognitions. Mr. Hillman?
Yes, we have several this evening, and you'll hear a few more announcements starting this month because of the sunsetting of the previous superintendent's update. So just know you'll hear a few more announcements at the beginning of the meeting. So we want to congratulate the Raiders skeet team. They won the state class 1A championship, and this was only our varsity team's second season competing in skeet. Tad Stanton took the varsity male and overall high score championship with a 99 out of 100 score. Jaden Schultz took second place in the female junior varsity competition, and Mason Sevcik took second place in the male JV competition. Almost all of the Raiders finished in the top 10 out of 1,100 students in their class. So very impressive. Congratulations to Coach Pete Mergens and the Raiders skeet team. Also just super thrilled to have seen this come out last week. So proud to announce that our very own Northfield Raiders, Ella Pagel, who has been both a varsity wrestler and a football player, is the All Metro Sports Awards Female Athlete of the Year for the Twin Cities metro area. Ella, who will be a junior this upcoming school year, has never lost a high school wrestling match in 2 years. And she's the only 165-pound high school champion the state has ever known because, of course, girls wrestling is in its infancy in Minnesota. And of course, if you read the Star Tribune article, they also talk about how she scored a touchdown against New Prague, and very proud of Ella and her being recognized really at this statewide level by the Star Tribune. So Ella, your entire community is very proud of you and your accomplishments, and excited to see as you continue next year. On our academic side, we want to congratulate one of our instructional coaches, Alicia Clary. Alicia is a former Greenville Park teacher who is now one of our 3 instructional coaches here in the district office, serving all schools. And Alicia recently completed the rigorous training to become a language essentials for teachers of reading and spelling. That's letters. Many people here are talking about letters. She became a letters facilitator, and she's currently trained our first in-person local cohort of 12 teachers. A letters certified facilitator is an expert in letters content who is qualified to deliver professional learning sessions and provide letter support to teachers. And Alicia has a deep understanding of the science of reading and is our local expert in research and evidence-based theories of letters. She's also a nationally certified trainer now. So that's a real boon to have that on our staff, and a tremendous amount of work for Alicia to have done it. Again, we talked about the READ Act. We are ahead of the game when it comes to the READ Act because of circumstances like this. We also want to share with the community this past week, we welcomed 3 new leaders to our administrative team. Sarah Pratt, who is not new to our team, but has a new position, is the new Director of Special Services, and she replaces Cheryl Hall, who retired after 38 years in public education. Sarah has worked for us. She started out as a speech language pathologist and then went and did some administrative work in some other school districts, and returned several years ago as our Assistant Director of Special Services, and thrilled to now have her in the director role. Caleb Davidson will now serve as our Assistant Director of Special Services. Caleb joins us from the Cannon Valley Special Education Cooperative, of which you're a member. He served as the lead teacher for the STEP program, providing services to students in the 18 to 21-year-old program. So we welcome Caleb officially to Northfield. He's been part of SEBSEC, which we are a member of, but we're thrilled to have him on our team as well. And then finally, John Mahal returns to the district as the Director of Student Activities. He takes the role held by Bubba Sullivan, who has chosen to return to his passion for teaching English at Northfield High School. We thank Bubba for his outstanding service over the last year, and know he's excited to get back into the English classroom. And John served as a special education teacher in Northfield before he held administrative positions in Shakopee and in Albert Lea. And so we welcome these 3 new leaders to our community, and those are your announcements for this evening.
That's wonderful. Excellent. Do the board members have any comments or any other announcements? Great. Right, we're on to item 5. These are our items for discussion and reports. And first up is the policy committee recommendations, which Dr. Hillman will present on the updates to 520.1805 and the updates to the citizenship handbook, as well as some updates for the legislative session 2023.
Yeah, so the first 2 items, the items for policy for consideration, these are items that are part of our regular review of policy. So 520.1 is the use of student, employee, and or district data or multimedia. What we've started to see is in fact, I just signed 2 research requests in the last couple of days for professional researchers to use student data as part of larger research projects. They can range from a person completing their master's degree to someone doing a dissertation, or in a case where we have partnerships, something, for example, we're working with the University of Wisconsin through our Reading Corps program. They're seeking to gather some data from our students in the Reading Corps program. And then another one about positive student greetings at the door. This is a partnership with the University of Minnesota. So those are the kinds of data requests that we get, but more and more regularly, we're starting to see some multimedia be part of some of those kinds of requests. So people who might be doing an ethnography, for example, they may want to interview some of our students as part of their research. And that is visual data. It's still data, but it's not hard number data. And that's why we're recommending adding the term multimedia. What it would require then is for people who are seeking those kinds of interviews to go through the same rigorous process as people who are seeking to get numerical data from the district. So those are the changes in 520.1. In policy 805, this is one where there's fairly modest changes to it, but it was something that was part of our regular review program. There's a lot of technical data in this, so it took a little longer to get to you because we had both buildings and grounds and finance look at the policy to make sure that we were following all of the components within it. And you'll see the biggest change is really the general statement of policy and some striking of some statutory references. So those are the two policies that are up for first reading tonight. I'm going to pause there and see if there are any questions on those two policies, and then I'll move on to the next item.
Okay, Amy.
So I have some comments on policy 520.1, and it was basically, I don't have a problem with the ideas of it, but I found the wording of it confused me. And I even ended up talking to Superintendent Hillman about it because I was confused about what it was about. Even in the title, it says use of students, employees, and/or district data or multimedia, including research requests. If this is truly about research requests, it should be really for research requests or in research requests instead of including, because including gives the idea that you have this group over here, but you also have something here that you're including into a larger group. So the title was the first thing that confused me. And then the other, regularly it would talk about, again, under purpose, the purpose of this policy is to establish guidelines for considering and improving requests for student, employee, or district use of data or multimedia. So it sounds like district use of multimedia. And what you really mean is some researchers' use of district data or researchers using multimedia in their research. And so that was just the little things that, kind of tripped up my brain when I was reading it. And I kept on looking for how is district using multimedia and why there was a disconnect with what I was reading. So I just wanted to ask that the committee go back and just think about that a little bit and maybe tweak the wording so it's very clear that we have researchers who are requesting district data, who are using multimedia, and not somehow district multimedia, and there's not anybody other than researchers that we're talking about. That's my request.
Thank you. That's why we do 2 readings, right?
Okay. Anyone else?
Okay, so moving on to the next part of this one. I wanted to point out to you just that at the last meeting, we brought you the Student Citizenship Handbook. I mean, typically you would have reviewed the Student Citizenship Handbook at that meeting, and then we would have asked you to approve it at this meeting. What we did is we gave you an interim update because as we have been working through what I'll share next, the 29 policies that are required to be updated or added as a result of the legislative session, there are quite a few disciplinary components that are within the new legislation. And so while we really think that we have it all integrated properly, we want to make sure that we take another month to be able to ensure that we have the appropriate changes from legislation reflected in the Student Citizenship Handbook. Our Student Citizenship Handbook effectively serves as the district's discipline policy. It's very different from the Minnesota School Boards Association model policy. We like the way that we present this to families so that people are very clear about the expectations of students and what potential consequences are for violating the components of the handbook. We just want to go back and we're also going through with our elementary principals one more time because the change in the statute that effectively prohibits suspensions in grades kindergarten through 3rd grade. Now, we suspend very few kindergarten through 3rd grade students. Once in a while, there was a need for that kind of disciplinary action to be able to serve that student better in the coming days. Those are effectively prohibited under law. So there were a few more spaces because we treated all activities as K-5. So there were some more places than what we had originally anticipated where a suspension could have been in play for a kindergarten through 3rd grader. So in this particular iteration of this, everywhere there had been a suspension in K-5, we've gone with the principal's discretion for right now. And then we're working with the building principals in the next, week or so to see, is that something that they're comfortable with, or are there some other things that they would like to add in that K-3 area where we have to make some of those changes. So we really think this one is incredibly important. It's important every year, but it's even more important this year because of the number of changes that the legislature made. And then that goes to the other document that we presented as part of this policy update. We provided 2 documents for you. One was the MSBA June newsletter on the legislative changes. And this is a really great quick guide for looking at all of the MSBA model policies that needed to be changed or added as a result of the new legislation. So you'll see the policy number, the policy title, and then it gives just a very high level overview of those, of the primary revisions to those policies. And so again, I'm in the consent grouping tonight, as we have said before, if we have policies that need to be updated simply for the purposes of aligning with new law, there's 17 policies in tonight's consent agenda. There's another dozen that we are still just making sure that we have all of the local items integrated. And those will come to you next month, but we just thought it was important in this policy segment for you to see all of the high level changes that are being made as a result of the 2023 legislative session. We continue to, I really want to thank Anita Ozzie worked on this solid for a couple of weeks to really take a look at what the new legislation is, what's the new model policy, how does that integrate with the policies that we've adopted. We've made really good headway, got some more to go, but so that's the policy piece tonight, the 2 items that were for first reading, which we've already discussed, the interim update for the Student Citizenship Handbook, and then just an overview of the policy changes that were a result of the Minnesota legislative session this past spring.
Thank you very much. Are there any comments or questions? Robert?
Just to note that at the end of the Student Citizenship Handbook, there's on page 29, there's a spreadsheet of expellable offenses, and I could be misreading it, but it doesn't look like we've updated that to match our changes and on each of the individual lines up above.
Page 29. So, Robert, I think that this is still in a reasonably good shape. And the reason I would say that is that there are still some offenses or occurrences of a student violating the Student Citizenship Handbook where a 4th or 5th grade student who would be considered elementary could be suspended. Against rare, but we want to make sure, or expelled, which is different than, these items are still viable for those potential 4th and 5th grade students. But I want to point out that when you look up in the, on page 28, Robert, when you look at the term of out of school suspension, I think that we have it. Is that where we put it? We have added in here that kindergarten through 3rd grade students are not able to be suspended in general. So I'm not seeing that right as I'm looking at it right now, but I can assure you that we did add that so that people are clear about it. I think it might be in the definitions, actually. Yes, it's in the definitions, actually, on page 27. If you look at that last one on page 27, it talks about what the definition of suspension is, and you'll see that that last sentence is underlined as being new since the last time. Does that answer your question?
Good, thank you. Anyone else, question or comment? Amy?
So first, thank you for addressing all of my questions and comments from the last meeting. I did go through and check, and I really appreciate your thoughtfulness in going through that. And I can see combining not only the board's comments and the committee's comments and the legislature's legal changes. It's a big, big job. So I appreciate Anita and everyone who's involved. I just am thinking into the future, because the other thing that you've shown us since the last meeting is the student handbooks online, which I'm very excited about. And I was looking at that, and I think that looks great. And I realized as a parent, I don't think people commonly know the difference between the student handbook and the citizenship handbook. And so as we think in the future, how we can, I don't think we have to combine the 2 documents, but we have to have both of them available online Because if people are looking in the student handbook and they're like, oh no, my kid had an edible on him, you know, what's going to happen? They're not going to find any information there. So we need to put the citizenship handbook accessible online as well, so it can be found.
Yeah, and they're actually both on the same page of the website. So there's the difference, there's the student citizenship handbook, I believe is listed first, if I'm remembering correctly, or but it's on the same exact page, and it describes the difference between the two. But we can always look to make it.
I'm glad I missed that. I will go back and check.
Yeah, when you click the handbooks link, you'll see that both are listed there. As you know, we discussed about the building level handbooks. When we moved them online, we discussed using a different name for them. And in this interim, we determined to use the same word as before because we didn't want to, well, where is that building handbook? So for right now, we're using similar terminology, but we would like to be able to modify it as we move ahead about the building level, more procedural handbook kind of, which is now available online. And it's in a much better format than it was before, and will be continuously improved as we move ahead.
Thank you.
Okay, anyone else? Jeff?
Yeah, just wondering on, you know, a lot of these, as I was reading through that, you know, it says police referral or whatever in there. And I'm just wondering, what kind of a process do we have, you know, to protect people? Because I mean, they might not even know they're really being accused of a crime. I mean, at least for the option to, who would you like to be in the room? Do you want to call your parent? Do you want to whatever else? And I think that we need to be upfront and really good at that process. Maybe we already are. I hope we are. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, we have a separate policy that covers that. And we also have some pieces that had been in the high school handbook about how we notify people if there's going to be, remember there's a difference. There's a police referral, which means we simply make a police report. That is different than a police interview. So really what the student citizenship handbook is saying is that there are some violations of the handbook that require us to make reports to police. That's the act that the student citizenship handbook is referring to. The part that you're talking about is the separate piece if they were to interview those students at school.
Well, yeah, okay. I just want to make sure that we have the process in, because people, you know, whether they're not, because I mean, things can escalate and they don't even realize that they're necessarily potentially being accused of a crime and not, you know, having representation there in some form when they have that option.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? All right, we will move on to item B, which is the annual fundraising report. And Director of Finance Val will review the fundraising report as required by policy 713 of the student activity account. Thanks, Val.
Was it on? There we go. So this is just the summary of the different fundraisers that were run through our student activity accounts. As you will notice, there's a wide variety of opportunities for students to participate. And so I have it broke out by the different activity, what they were doing. We see a lot of quick trip gas cards and bagging groceries at Cub, and some other creative ideas, our annual poinsettia fundraiser. And I would say the vast majority are just raising funds to offset costs for matching gear or some kind of trip that they want to take as a team to an invite or some other kind of event that's outside of the normal competition schedule, if that makes sense. So overall, you can see the profit that was added to their activity accounts, but it's pretty straightforward, and I would be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Great, thank you. Anyone have a question or a comment? Amy.
First, thank you for this. And it's very clear and easy to read. So I don't have a question about the content of it. I just have a comment, and that is, how do we help promote these different fundraisers for these groups? Because I don't know if it's just in the student newsletters or if there's any way online that we could help promote them, because I think these are great numbers, but I'm sure if we can let more of our Northfielders know that there's going to be a car wash, more people will show up.
Yeah, that's a good comment. I think right now it's pretty much been up to the individual team and the members and what their willing to do and what their plan was, but I can certainly provide that feedback to the activities department.
Yep, great. Anyone else, comment or question? Okay, thank you so much, Val. Right. Oh, and you're up for item C as well. Benjamin Bus contract terms for 2023-2025. The board will be asked to take action on this contract at the August 14th board meeting.
Thank you. So we are requesting a 2-year extension of our 2-year agreement with Benjamin Bus. We went through the RFP process 2 years ago, and that contract allowed for a 2-year extension. As you know, we've been with Benjamin Bus for a very long time, and they provide exceptional service for the district. This 2-year extension includes an A grade increase of about 5.5% for 23-24 and 4% for 24-25. Both of those are less than the inflation we've seen. Just for some context, I did include what our overall regular to from transportation looks like when you apply those rates to it across the board. So that had a 4% increase in each of those years. And we had seen a 3% increase from 21-22 to 22-23. So you can kind of see how that plays out. We have 23 routes, I believe, over 173 student contact days. The only other change to the language was increasing the fuel clause from $2.75 a gallon to $3 a gallon. Obviously, we've seen fuel costs increase pretty substantially. So we're just bringing that more in line with what we've seen in this current market. We have really no concerns with Benjamin Bus. They've been an excellent partner. They recently donated transportation for the ALC Boundary Waters trip, which is quite a haul. And so that's a pretty substantial donation, as well as a really substantial discount on the transportation for the parade of graduates, which I think was very a positive experience for the students and for the elementary schools. So obviously it's my recommendation to approve it, but if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them, and it'll be an item on the August 14th meeting.
Great. Anyone have a question or comment? Amy?
So thanks again for this. And I am wondering, I know you had a lot of conversations when we were going through the budget prioritization process earlier in the year. You talked with Benjamin Bus and you talked about trying to streamline the services. I'm wondering if this new contract is taking in consideration any streamlining, or is it based on what we're currently doing, or was there any impact at all from those discussions?
I would say it's a little too soon to tell if we'll be able to. So the numbers I show in my narrative are based on our current routes. So we have 23 routes currently. They are still getting all of the registration forms, and they will start, I would say, probably in the next 2 or 3 weeks, really starting to kind of dive and process that. And so we'll have a better sense, because we're requiring the opt-in transportation where you have to fill out the form to register, which is a little different than what they've done before. And so we'll know more, I would say, in the next 3 weeks. I'm sure I can have an update before the August 14th meeting about where we're seeing student numbers and ridership and that sort of thing. But they don't really, they do all the ESY and targeted services transportation right now and get that routed. And so it's usually the end of July before they start really collecting and building that system for the fall. So, yeah.
Good question. Okay, anyone else? Corey.
Thanks for your ongoing support with Benjamin Bus. I have a question about the fuel clause. Obviously, I'm glad to see that number come up. That's going to be a savings for us, of course. Over the last fiscal year, do you know what our cost was for that difference? Gas has been at $3.50 a gallon, and what potential savings we might see by increasing that by a quarter?
I should have anticipated that question. I don't have that off the top of my head, but I can get that number for you.
Okay, thank you.
Very good. Anyone else?
I had the same question Corey did, so good job with that one.
Good. Very well. Okay, thank you, Val.
Thanks.
Okay, item D is a staffing update. and contingency request. And Superintendent Hillman will give us an update on that.
Yeah, so what I'm sharing with you tonight is cutting to the, not bearing the lead, is I'm going to ask the board to increase the amount of FTE that we have in what we've called our contingency budget. So our contingency budget is a budget of full-time equivalent positions that we are able to use on an annual basis to address the most pressing class size issues that arise typically as people are scheduling. And so for many years, we were at 3.0. A few years back, we moved back to 1.5. And I'm suggesting that we go back to 3.0, especially as we work to adjust to our reality of fewer students with our declining enrollment. We are going to have situations where if all of the students took classes in a perfectly even manner, we would be fine. But as we're adjusting to what our new enrollment is, having the flexibility to address significant issues is warranted. So this year, for example, I just want to share with you a couple of examples. First of all, whenever we're looking at where there's a class size issue, we are always looking at, is there other FTE that we already have within the budget that is being underutilized, or is there a way that we are able to reassign something to address that issue? By way of example, we have one elementary grade level that just a reverse of last year. Last year, the one building had its smallest kindergarten ever, and the other building had its biggest kindergarten ever, and they flipped that this year. Our data suggested we didn't have any reason to anticipate anything less than 4 sections in each building, which would have been very typical. But one building with over 100 kindergarten students with 4 classrooms planned, another with only 55 students and 4 classrooms planned. Good stewardship says that we move one of those planned sections from the building with 55 students to the building with 107 students. That's just good stewardship. We're doing that within the budget. Other scenarios that we have where we have some challenges at the high school, for example, while we're seeing an increase in enrollment next year, followed by starting to see the declining enrollment really impact the high school. They do have a number of courses, elective courses, for example, that are over-enrolled, students who are really interested in a particular course, but we only had so many students or so many sections planned. We really want to try to accommodate those students to the best of our ability. We are already going to have some a little bit larger class sizes as a result of our budget reductions. But the great part about contingency is we can assign it for 1 year, and at the end of the year, it expires and comes back to the district's FTE budget, and we can dole that out each year as the need is and reassign it each year. It can be used for either professional staff, certified staff, or non-certified staff. Another dilemma that we have that is a result of at Bridgewater having an overall smaller grade level. This is an example of how when students show up, they don't always fit into the nice, neat buckets of across the entire building. At the end of the school year, we had 68 students in the kindergarten class at Bridgewater. They're going to be in first grade next year. Since the end of the school year, we have 9 additional students who have registered. Now that means that we're at 77 students. With 68 students, we typically will see the Compañeros class reach its limit of 26 students. That happens fairly often. And then the remaining students would have been 20 students in 2 other sections. A 3-section grade level would have been wonderful. Well, we added 9 students. We also have a lower than usual enrollment in that Compañeros cohort, so only 16 so far. So we're in a dilemma where those other 2 first grade classes could be above 30. This is an example where an expansion of contingency could allow us to address that dilemma and then work on how we're going to handle that Compañeros section through the year. So those are just some examples of why contingency can be helpful. We want to bring each of these items to you over time, but it is just good governance for us to be able to have some flexibility in that contingency enrollment to be able to address those items. So the good news that I will share with you is that we do have, in talking with our administrators, we are in pretty good shape with our positions being filled. We have a couple that are hanging out there yet, but at this point in the year, given the market, we're feeling that we're in pretty good shape. This contingency piece would also help us just be able to address, you'll see in the packet tonight, there's some high school teachers who are taking overloads because they happen to teach in a content area where some of the sections were over enrolled and more students wanted those electives than we had originally assigned FTE for. And if we, could have looked and said, can we take some FTE from somewhere else? We would have done so, but we're just not in that circumstance right now. So wanted to give you an update on staffing and then also give you this ask this evening.
Thank you very much. Are there any comments or questions from the board members? Okay, Amy.
I just have a question about the contingency positions. So I understand that in middle school and high school might be overloads.
Yep.
But in the situations where we're hiring a teacher full-time, are they told that it's a contingent position and they are only getting promised a job for a year? And do they get put on the seniority system for the union? And, what sort of jeopardy might we be putting ourselves in down the line?
Yeah, great question. So any position that is funded by contingency is posted as a 1 year only position. So in the job description itself, it says it's a position for 1 year, and that person is a probationary contract teacher, and they will get a contract that ends at the end of that end of next year. You will also see that at the end of each year, even with positions like this, we will non-renew staff in that case as well. Just that's a legal technical process that we go through. So I feel very comfortable that people know that these contingency positions are for 1 year only because they are posted that way. The contract says it in that way. I don't believe we're in any jeopardy, because even if we hire someone from the outside who is new to us, and let's say they have had tenure in another district, they still need to complete 1 year of probation before they get a continuing contract here. So I'm very comfortable with the 1 year piece being appropriate with contingency.
Thank you very much. Any other? Yes, Robert.
And I have both a comment and a question. Comment, I know this situation at Bridgewater with the Compañeros program was unusual, not having class fill to what we would have expected. Looking ahead, and with declining enrollment, we're going to need a larger proportion of each of the classes at each building to fill that section. And with Compañeros having been such a benefit to so many families and students through the years, I'm wondering if to stay ahead of it, we might want to think about thinking about a similar task force to like we've had for our CTE program, and thinking about how do we keep the interest there? How do we keep students enrolling in the program? And then question being, with it being 5 weeks before we meet again here, is this a circumstance where you and our building administrators could use this time if we make a motion and pass this today, if that would be of help for the schools?
Well, the second question is, as you know, we try to do a two-step process, but from time to time, board members will seek to approve something like this in one meeting. And it would be helpful because obviously for that one section of first grade, we could post it. We would be able to have people who are still, we know there are still quality people looking for positions. And the earlier you're able to post and hire that, of course, the better off we all are for that. The second part is believe it or not, we already have, it's not a task force, but Director of Instructional Services Hope Langston is leading with our Compañeros teachers a program review. This is the first program review of Compañeros in about 12 years. And so they are looking through all of those pieces about content and marketing and all of those kinds of things that the Compañeros program has really grown. If people remember, there was a period of time where we had the Compañeros program just at 2 buildings. And then in 2010, we moved the Compañeros program to all 3 elementary schools. So it is something that we have looked at over time. It's again, a program we're very proud of. We're very proud of the fact that people choose Northfield for it. And we are just looking at what does the programming look like. Number one, to really support our teaching staff who teach all of the normal content plus Spanish, right? Spanish language and Spanish culture. And then in addition, making sure that we are marketing the program well enough to where people know about it, they understand the value of it. I think there was something that people just knew about it, right? It was just a very Northfield thing that you knew about Compañeros. And I think now as we continue to see schools always reinvent themselves, not taking that for granted that it's going to fill every year, And the truth is, as grades shrink, 26 is a great number for 80 or 90 students in a grade level, which was very typical for us to have. That fill might be a little bit less than that, right? It might be more based on a percentage of the grade level as opposed to a raw number, if that makes sense. So that is something we will certainly continue to work for, because we want to have that quality program that does draw people, especially as houses become available. As we see the housing open up, hopefully here, we know that this is something for people who are looking at the South Metro is a real draw for folks to come to Northfield.
Well, thank you. And I'm glad to hear we've got a program review. I'd like to make a motion that we add this piece for the contingency to our the agenda.
All right, there's a motion to move the contingency request to items for individual action. Moved by Robert. Second. Is there a second? By Corey. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, then that passes, and we'll move that to items for individual action later tonight. Next up is the potential grant writer. But yeah, there's Dr. Hillman will present a concept document about a potential grant writer position.
So this is a document where we say we're thinking about asking you something, and we just want to get some feedback from board members before we get too far down the road with it. So as you know, I lowballed it in my narrative because my quick look of the legislative slide deck from MD showed there was at least $150 million in competitive grants for in addition to the categorical funding. And there's also categorical funding that's going to operate in a grant-like fashion. Val did the numbers, $230 million of competitive grants that are available to schools as a result of the omnibus education bill. And of course, with grants, we seek grants that help us achieve the benchmarks, the strategic commitments, and our vision from the strategic plan. So we're not chasing money. We are looking at the dollars that were appropriated by the legislature in areas that we have been working on, in which we could have both a financial benefit and a benefit toward accelerating our progress toward success on the benchmarks that you've adopted as the indicators of health within the school system. So when we think about all of those, the way that we have really operated with grants in our school district for a long time is we've used a combination of external grant writers from the community who typically worked for some consortia groups like the Healthy Community Initiative. Sometimes Northfield Promise might write some of those grants. And then typically we will also have people within the district who will write a grant for their particular area. When we are talking about this amount of money and the fact that it is competitive grants and that our district has a history of successful programming with grants, all I have to name is Torch and the community school program. Those two programs have been heavily grant funded for a couple of decades. So we have the understanding of how to use grants to accelerate our progress toward achieving our benchmarks. But what I will tell you is that it's very difficult. I've outlined three potential options. One would be we could look at a freelance grant writer option. I give you some pros and cons of that. The pro is that we don't hire anyone new. We can identify one person for each grant that we're looking at. But the con is now we're having to provide data to all of those people who are doing the freelance grant writing. They don't have necessarily an intimate knowledge of the school, and you pay that grant writer regardless of whether the grant is successful or not. You're not allowed to give people, kind of a percentage of what they bring in. A second option would be to continue having our own staff members write grants. And while this has been effective and we can point to several grants that we have secured, it is not efficient because what is happening is our staff who are writing these grants are not expert grant writers. They are experts in the fields of which they have been hired for. So they are deviating from their day-to-day job to write a grant to be able to help them achieve their goals, right? Their department or their building goals. It can be a good thing, but it does deviate from their day-to-day work. A full-time grant writer is someone who's skilled in understanding what is the core information that the organization would need to be successful, not only with these state grants, but with a number of other grants that could be available from other departments. They also really understand how to write reports and there's also, you get the grant, now you have to execute it. That's the professional staff's job, is to execute the grant. But then there's all the follow-up of the reporting and whatnot. And this is the kind of thing that a grant writer or a similarly grant-funded position could do. You are able in most grants to include a certain percentage for the administration of the grant. And we do believe with the right person and the amount of money that we know is going to be available, there is a likelihood that this position with a skilled individual could pay for most of its own salary and benefits and potentially even eclipse that based upon the number of grants that we are able to be successful. I want to also emphasize not just the grants themselves, but these other categorical funding models that are almost grant-like in nature. By way of example, in the READ Act, there's some funds for training, but those funds for training aren't just automatically assigned to schools. It appears that there's going to be an application process. You're going to get them, but you still have to complete the application. You have to complete the follow-up reporting. So this is the kind of thing that this position potentially could do. You all recall the real difficult process we went through with the budget reductions over the last 2 years. And I know every single one of you has heard from someone in the community saying, there's so many grants out there. Why aren't we getting grants so that we can get external funding to be able to support our schools so that we maybe don't have to do as many reductions? We all know that, you know, grants aren't a way to avoid reductions, but they are a way that we can potentially do some sustaining of programs. But you do need someone who is able to do those things. So I also want to share with you that I happen to be talking with Justin Robley, our new director of buildings and grounds today. And when I mentioned this to him, he lit up. You know, I'm not just having this light up because he was excited about LED grants, right? So lit up LED grants. Okay. But the point is yes, there you go. But the point of it is that for sustainability and for things like that, there's also dollars in the state budget and from other areas where we would be able to potentially accelerate our progress on some of those conservation efforts that we've been looking at as well. So what I'm just really interested in is if board members have feedback about this, does this seem to make sense? It might make sense as we further explore it to not just have this be a grant writer, but to be a position that is funded by the administration fee of these grants, where they might be able to do some additional things in addition to grant writing, because they're already doing some of that anyway. So we haven't landed exactly where this would go, but we think that there's some real positive nature from something like this. So I just want to hear from board members if you think it's worth it for us to continue down this path. If so, we'd bring you a formal proposal on August 14th.
Wonderful. Right. Board members, do you have any comments, Jeff?
Yeah, I think that's worth it. Definitely looking into, obviously. So you're talking about 150 million to 230 million that was in this omnibus bill.
Yep.
So my obvious question would be, what's normally on the table in other years for money?
Yeah, that's a great question. This makes everything else pale in comparison. I don't recall there being valid, I think the most, well, it certainly didn't eclipse the $100 million mark before. So this is unusual because of the $2.2 billion education portion of the state budget. And of course, there was some really great investments in fixing some of the long-term addressing some of the long-term structural issues. But a lot of it was put in, 230 million of it was put into these categorical or competitive grants.
Mm-hmm.
And if you did have a grant writer, how long of position would that be in terms of?
Yes, that's a great question. So this would be, it would have to be an administrative position or in that kind of support staff category. And almost all of our administrative or those kinds of positions are at-will employees. So it would be the kind of thing that if we got a couple of years out and there wasn't as many dollars as available, we could plan to sunset that position.
Final question. Are these all open to the 327 public school districts out there?
Yeah, great question. In fact, I would argue that they're not only open to all the 331 traditional public school districts, but to all the charter schools as well. So there's a competitive piece here. And what really drove my desire to bring this before you is when we recently won a competitive grant, in fact, it was the Grow Your Own grant. I was discussing with some colleagues that there are many districts that don't even bother to submit a grant to the state because they know that there's so many places through the state who have a full-time grant writer or people who are skilled at this that they don't feel they have any kind of chance because they know that they don't have the capacity with their existing staff to compete for it. And I think that that's probably a fair estimate. And I think especially since these grants tend to be available to schools, this is why we think the time is now to consider this at least.
And final question, I said that before, but you're not really looking for any board approval to go look for something. Are you looking with anything that we could do tonight? Because I mean, obviously there's a lot of people
Yeah.
that are looking for grant writers.
So I'm not feeling that we need to
Okay.
do this tonight. You know,
Okay.
Robert's question before, the difference between Robert's question and this one is that the additional FT allows us to post for positions that we know, you know, what the job description is. The key thing is that our next layer of this is to write the job description and to try to think, is there a way that we can leverage some of the administrative fees with this grant to also help in some other areas that would be beneficial? Are the areas where I'm already writing a grant, you know, and so I have to report data? Does it make sense that I also help do data in some other spaces as well? That's just an example of some of the kinds of thinking, Jeff. So we're not quite prepared yet like we were with the previous one.
Oh, good. Amy.
I think this is a fantastic idea. Everybody is always saying, why can't we find outside sources of funding? And this is one way that we can try to do that. And even if the funds are more toward enhancements of the education than the basic, you know, I think that's good too. We can improve the level of quality of education that we're giving to our students. I come from a, you know, higher education background, and I hear this, and I remember I've worked for a number of universities, and I know some of them would charge 60% of the grant price in indirect costs. So if you know, that means if they got $100,000 grant, they'd actually get $160,000. Now, I'm not saying we could charge 60%, but I don't think it's a small amount of money that they will have available to help cover those indirect costs of having the grant.
And there are some limitations in some grants on how much of the overall award can be coded to the administrative fee. So I want to be really clear. We hypothesize that we could pay for quite a bit of the position. It is possible. Some would even maybe go as far as say likely. I would say possible that we could even cover the entire cost of the position. I think it's more likely up front that we'd be able to cover a substantial portion of the position.
Which would be great too. So then the other thing I just wanted to mention is, you know, I know grants have lots of deadlines, and I'm not necessarily pushing for tonight, but I think we all understand how this could be a great thing for our school district. And if there are a lot of deadlines that are coming up at the beginning of the school year for grants, maybe we should think about accelerating the process if we need to.
Okay, we'll keep that in mind as we push forward with the job description and just trying to align what are the areas that this particular position could hypothetically support.
Nice work. Sounds like everybody's really excited about it. A lot of potential. Okay, we're on to item F, the summary of the superintendent's performance appraisal, and I will present that. The full summary is in the packet. I'll read some of it tonight, and it is truly my honor and a true privilege to present this. Dr. Hillman, as you like to say, won't bury the lead. You are an outstanding leader, and you are appreciated by this board. So my summary, some of it goes like this. This is for the period July 1, 2022 through June 30th, 2023. And I have some opening comments. It says the superintendent is the sole employee of the Northfield Public School Board of Education. The district's day-to-day operations are delegated to Dr. Hillman, and the current board members are tasked to evaluate him on a semi-annual and annual basis. The evaluation covers all facets of the superintendent's job responsibilities, and board members provide numeric ratings on a 1 to 5 scale and are asked to provide comments to support those ratings, 1 being the lowest, 5 being the highest, for 41 job responsibilities organized around 8 major topics and 5 focus areas. For this period, all board members submitted an evaluation. 5 out of 7 board members submitted comments to various questions explaining the rationale behind their numeric rating or offering further insight into their evaluation for any particular category. I compiled and summarized the board members' evaluations, and the numeric ratings are means were calculated. All the comments were shared with Dr. Hillman verbatim, but not attributed to a specific board member. And we met this past week to review that evaluation. Dr. Hellman received an excellent evaluation, achieving an overall rating of 4.7 out of 5. That's fantastic. I'll highlight one area of the evaluation and share board members' comments in that area. I have several comments from the board members. I'll share just one. First, a definition of what the category of instructional leadership includes. It includes several key components which define our district. That is development of educational programs and curriculum to meet the needs of all students, development of staff, use of federal funds, informing school board members of the district's needs relating to other districts for mutual benefit, following educational trends, and meeting the community's expectations. This is what one of the 4 board members shared for this particular category. Dr. Hellman definitely leads the district with a strong focus on its instructional programs. He demonstrates a superior knowledge of best and emerging practices in education and encourages constant evaluation and improvement. The superintendent has fostered a culture that empowers administrators and staff to collaborate, identify improved practices, find areas in need of improvement, and thoughtfully envision and enact creative solutions. The superintendent also keeps the board informed of the district's educational needs and gives thorough recommendations on how to address these necessities while remaining committed to our vision and strategic commitments. Some excellent praises in the comment section, and then wanted to also add this piece from another board member who said, in addition, he's the 2023 Minnesota Superintendent of the Year, which involved traveling and meeting with top superintendents around the country. He uses what he has learned from his personal and professional experiences to teach upcoming superintendents at the University of Minnesota. He's remarkable. True. In conclusion, these comments, along with his overall rating in the 8 topics and 5 focus areas, speak to the full confidence this board has in Dr. Hellman and his leadership over our special district. We as a district are incredibly fortunate to have such a quality leader. The school board is grateful for your leadership. Thank you, and congratulations on a great score.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll move on now to item number 6, and that is the consent grouping. As a reminder, there were some personnel items in the table file added to the consent grouping. Is there anything anyone would like to pull from the consent grouping for separate consideration? Is there a motion to approve the consent grouping? Moved by Robert, second. By Corey. All those in favor of approving the consent grouping, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay, motion carries. Item 7 is our items for individual action, and we have 6 items now for action, and 2 of them are resolutions. Anita will help facilitate that roll call vote. The first item is the nursing proposal. I'll take a motion first, and then we can discuss. Is there a motion to approve the addition of a year-round nurse at the NCEC, partially funded through recently approved legislation for student support personnel effective for the 23-24 school year?
So moved.
Okay, moved by Corey, second. Second by Amy. All right, is there any discussion before we move to vote? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Right, motion passes. Next item for action is the policy committee recommendations. Is there a motion to approve the policy committee's recommended updates to the 23-24 early ventures, hand-in-hand preschool, and kid ventures as presented? Moved by Robert, second. Second by Amy. All right, is there any discussion on this item? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? All right, motion passes. Moving right along. Item C is the fiscal year 2023 audit engagement letter. Okay, Director of Finance Val Murdersdorf recommends approval of the Clifton Larson Allen LLP audit engagement letter for the audit of the 22-23 school year. The engagement letter establishes the parameters and fees associated with the annual audit required by statute. Is there a motion to accept the 22-23 engagement letter from Clifton Larson Allen LLP in the amount of $19,600, uniform grant guidance compliance audit, federal program expenditures, if needed, in the amount of $4,000 per audited federal program, consulting assistance for SBI TDA preparation tools, templates, and calculator in the amount of $1,500 plus expenses. Somebody like to move on that? Moved by Amy, second. Okay, second by Corey. Is there any discussion on the audit engagement letter? Okay, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay, motion passes. Next, we have a resolution regarding conducting a school business on the Federal Indigenous Peoples Day. A regular school board meeting is scheduled for Monday, October 9, 2023, which is the Federal Indigenous Peoples Day holiday. Minnesota Statute 645.44 Subdivision 5 states that no public business shall be transacted on a federal holiday. Where it is determined that Indigenous Peoples Day is not a holiday, public business may be conducted thereon. So what follows is a resolution stating Indigenous Peoples Day shall not be a holiday for the Northfield Public Schools during the 2023-2024 school year. I'll take a motion to approve the resolution regarding Indigenous Peoples Day, and then I will read the resolution. Is there a motion to conduct business on October 9, 2023? Okay, moved by Amy. Second by Corey. Okay, here is the resolution. Whereas Minnesota Statute Section 645.44 Subdivision 5 and Minnesota Statutes 120A.42 gives the district an option of determining whether Indigenous Peoples Day shall be a holiday, then be it resolved that Indigenous Peoples Day on October 9, 2023 shall not be a holiday. We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion, questions, or comments? Okay. Anita, will you facilitate the roll call vote?
Butler.
Aye.
Coleman.
Aye.
Gerwitz.
Aye.
Gonzalez George.
Aye.
Quinnell.
Aye.
Okay, motion passes. Thank you, Anita. Okay, I have another resolution. I'll take a motion first and then we can discuss. I'll read the resolution. Let me read the resolution and then we'll move on to a motion. Be it resolved by the Board of Education of Independent School District number 659 as follows. The Minnesota Department of Education, MDE, requires that school districts annually designate an identified official with authority to comply with the MNIT Enterprise Identity and Access Management Standard, which states that all users' access rights to Minnesota state systems must be reviewed and recertified at least annually. The identified official with authority will assign job duties and authorize external users access to MDE secure systems for their local education agency. The board authorizes Dr. Matthew Hillman to act as the identified official with authority, the Iowa, and Christine Nessett to act as the Iowa to add and remove names only for Northfield Public Schools 0659-01. Is there a motion to approve the resolution as outlined?
So moved.
Okay, moved by Corey. Second by Robert. Is there any discussion on this resolution, comments, or questions? Okay. Anita, will you facilitate?
Butler.
Aye.
Coleman.
Aye.
Gerwitz.
Aye.
Gonzalez George.
Aye.
Quinnell.
Aye.
Okay, motion passes. Our final item for items for individual action is that approval of the contingency request that was presented earlier this evening. Is there a motion to approve that request? Moved by Amy, second. By Robert. All those in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay, motion passes. Next item is items for information. I don't have anything, you don't have anything. Okay. And then item number 9 is our future meetings. They will be in this boardroom at 6 p.m. on Monday, August 14th, Monday, August 28th, and Monday, September 11th. Next is our closed meeting. As you can see on the agenda, this meeting will be closed as permitted by Minnesota Statute 13D.03 to discuss labor negotiations. Is there a motion to enter into our closed session? Moved by Jeff, second. Second by Corey. All those in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay, motion passes, and we are now moving into a closed session, and we invite members of the public to exit the room or wait on us, to exit the room. And when we are done with our session, we will move to adjournment.
Debbie, sure, this is